Welcome to California Bar Prep, your study companion for the California Bar exam. In this lesson, Equitable Remedies, Injunctions, Specific Performance, Constructive Trusts, and Liens. Let's begin. Equity is tested when money is not enough, when the defendant threatens continuing harm, or when the plaintiff needs a specific asset rather than a damages number. California essay graders expect you to know the major forms of equitable relief, but they reward the answer that explains why equity should act. The traditional phrase is that legal remedies are inadequate, but that does not mean damages must be impossible. It means damages would not provide complete, practical, and efficient justice under the circumstances. The major equitable remedies are injunction, specific performance, constructive trust, equitable lien, rescission, reformation, accounting, and declaratory relief. This lesson focuses on the four that appear most often in bar essays: injunctions, specific performance, constructive trusts, and equitable liens. Each remedy has its own function. An injunction orders a party to do or stop doing something. Specific performance enforces a contractual promise. A constructive trust gives the plaintiff title to specific property wrongfully held by the defendant. An equitable lien gives the plaintiff a security interest in property to secure payment. California Civil Code sections 3384 through 3395 address specific and preventive relief. Civil Code section 3422 recognizes circumstances in which obligations cannot be specifically enforced, including where performance would require personal services, where terms are not sufficiently certain, or where enforcement would be unjust. Civil Code section 3423 restricts injunctions in certain settings. These statutes matter because California frequently tests equitable remedies through a statutory lens, even though the analysis remains rooted in traditional equity. A party seeking equitable relief generally must show a valid substantive right, inadequacy of legal remedies, feasibility of enforcement, and that the balance of hardships and public interest favor relief. Equitable defenses include laches, unclean hands, estoppel, waiver, unconscionability, hardship, and lack of mutuality or certainty in specific performance. An injunction is a court order commanding action or restraint. A prohibitory injunction tells the defendant to stop. A mandatory injunction requires affirmative conduct. Temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions preserve the status quo before final judgment. Permanent injunctions issue after success on the merits. For preliminary relief, courts evaluate likelihood of success on the merits and interim harm, often using a sliding scale. The plaintiff must show irreparable harm, meaning harm not adequately compensable by damages, such as loss of unique property, trade secrets, constitutional rights, goodwill, privacy, real property interests, or repeated trespasses. The court also considers the balance of hardships and the public interest. A bond may be required for provisional relief. Note: do not say irreparable injury as a magic phrase. Explain why the harm cannot be measured, collected, or repaired by a later damages judgment. Specific performance compels a party to perform a contract. It is most common for contracts involving land, unique goods, closely held stock, heirlooms, rare art, or other property with no adequate market substitute. Land is traditionally treated as unique, so a buyer of real property has a strong claim to specific performance if contract requirements are met. The plaintiff must show a valid contract with sufficiently certain terms, plaintiff's performance or readiness and ability to perform, defendant's breach or threatened breach, inadequacy of legal remedy, and equitable fairness. The decree must be feasible to supervise. Courts will not specifically enforce personal service contracts because compelled labor raises policy problems and supervision difficulties. They may, however, enforce a negative covenant not to work for a competitor if reasonable and not an unlawful restraint. Civil Code section 3391 identifies situations where specific performance cannot be enforced, including inadequate consideration, contracts not just and reasonable, or terms not sufficiently certain. Civil Code section 3387 creates a presumption that damages are inadequate for breach of an agreement to transfer real property, though the presumption can be contested in unusual circumstances. A constructive trust is an equitable remedy imposed to prevent unjust enrichment. It is not an express trust created by intent. It arises by operation of law when the defendant wrongfully acquired or retained specific property, or its traceable proceeds. The plaintiff must identify property, show the plaintiff's right to it, and show defendant's wrongful acquisition, detention, or unjust enrichment. Constructive trust is powerful because it can give priority over general creditors and capture appreciation. If a fiduciary steals trust money and buys a house, the beneficiary may seek a constructive trust over the house or a proportionate share. If the property has appreciated, the plaintiff generally wants constructive trust. If the property has declined, a money judgment may be preferable. An equitable lien is a non-possessory security interest imposed on property to secure payment of a debt or obligation. It is appropriate when the plaintiff cannot fairly claim full ownership of the property, but can show her money or property contributed to its acquisition, improvement, or preservation. It is also useful when the disputed property has declined in value or when the plaintiff wants a charge rather than title. Example: a wrongdoer uses $40,000 of plaintiff's money and $160,000 of his own money to buy land. A constructive trust over the entire land may overreach unless facts justify full ownership. An equitable lien for $40,000, possibly with interest or proportional appreciation depending on tracing and fairness, may better fit. Injunction versus specific performance. Injunction regulates conduct. Specific performance enforces a contract promise. Specific performance is a form of mandatory, equitable relief, but analyze contract requirements separately. Constructive trust versus equitable lien. Constructive trust gives ownership of specific property. Equitable lien gives a charge against property to secure payment. Preliminary versus permanent injunction. Preliminary relief predicts merits and prevents interim harm. Permanent relief follows actual success. Negative injunction versus personal service decree. Courts will not force personal services, but may sometimes restrain uniquely harmful competitive conduct if the restraint is lawful and not oppressive. Laches bars equitable relief when the plaintiff unreasonably delays and the delay prejudices the defendant. It is not the same as the statute of limitations, although limitations periods influence the analysis. Prejudice may include lost evidence, changed position, increased costs, or investment made in reliance on plaintiff silence. Unclean hands bars relief when the plaintiff's inequitable conduct relates directly to the transaction at issue. The misconduct must have an immediate and necessary relation to the claim. General bad character is not enough. If both parties behaved badly, the court decides whether granting relief would make the court an instrument of injustice. Do not treat inadequacy of legal remedy as one size fits all. For land, uniqueness supports specific performance. For trade secrets, secrecy and competitive harm support injunction. For stolen funds used to buy property, insolvency and tracing support constructive trust or lien. For ordinary goods available in the market, damages or cover are usually adequate. Do not ignore feasibility. A decree requiring years of intimate cooperation, artistic judgment, or personal services is disfavored. A decree requiring transfer of a deed, return of a painting, removal of an encroaching structure, or cessation of disclosure is easier to supervise. Do not forget defenses. Remedies essays often give facts like delay, plaintiff's misconduct, defendant's improvements, or third-party purchasers. These facts are not decoration. They are equitable defenses. A high-scoring answer begins with the plaintiff's goal. If the plaintiff wants performance of a real estate contract, analyze specific performance and mention Civil Code Section 3387. If the plaintiff wants to stop repeated trespasses or trade secret disclosure, analyze injunction. If the defendant bought an asset with misappropriated funds, analyze constructive trust and equitable lien. That's it for this lesson. Download California Bar Prep on the App Store for lessons on all 14 bar subjects, practice questions, and essay frameworks. Keep studying, and good luck on the bar exam.